Hi learners, in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to walk you through every major DevOps practices and concepts that you need to know. From the culture that makes it work to Linux fundamentals, all the way up to Kubernetes, cloud, and AI infrastructure. So you can understand how modern software systems are built, tested, deployed, and kept running in production. Hi, I'm Vishaka, and for almost 8 years, I've been working in different DevOps and platform-based roles, automating deployments, configuring CI/CD pipelines, migrating from on-prem to cloud infrastructure, setting up Kubernetes clusters, and now I'm working as a solutions architect focused on AI inference. Now, if you have ever looked at a DevOps job description, you might have seen a long list of requirements: Linux, Git, Cloud, CI/CD, Docker, Kubernetes, Terraform, and now AI infrastructure. It can feel like 12 different career paths packaged into one role. So, today we are going to cover these topics in a very deliberate order, not alphabetically, not tool by tool. We'll start with the DevOps mindset and the roles involved. Then we'll cover the foundations: Linux, scripting, networking, and cloud. From there, we'll move into the delivery pipeline: Git, CI/CD, Docker, containers, and DevSecOps workflows. Finally, we'll look at operating infrastructure layer, setting up infrastructure as code, GitOps, observability, and then wrap up with AI infrastructure and AIOps workflows. Alright, let's get started. We'll start with DevOps culture and roles. Before any tool, first understand what problem does DevOps solves. Traditionally, developers wrote code and the operations team deployed and maintained them on production servers. So developers focused on building newer features and operations team focused on keeping those systems stable and reliable. These separate responsibilities often led to slower releases, communication gaps, and friction between these two teams. This is where DevOps comes in. And in many organizations, there are dedicated teams automating these workflows, improving the communication piece, and making the software delivery faster and reliable. No silos. Now, the roles that come under this bucket. You'll see DevOps engineers building pipelines and automation workflows, SREs, aka Site Reliability Engineers, focused on uptime, incident response, and reliability targets. Platform engineers building the internal tools that developers can use. And cloud and solutions architect designing the overall infrastructure. These titles overlap constantly, so don't stress on it. The skills underneath are following the same foundation stack that we are about to walk through. And that stack starts at the bottom. The first one here is Linux or Windows skills and scripting. Almost everything in DevOps runs on Linux. Your containers, your Kubernetes pods, your CI runners, your cloud VMs. Linux, 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 Linux. Everywhere there is Linux. So you might have already heard about it a lot, that it's a non-negotiable foundation. Today, let me tell you why. When you're working with systems, you need to interact with it. This is where Linux skills come into picture. So practically, that means you need to be comfortable with the terminal, navigating the file system, managing the processes, finding out what's running, what's eating the CPU, checking disk usage with commands like df, du, figuring out which service died, how you can restart it, then checking logs, knowing about the folders where these logs are stored, what's the /varlog directory, and as an admin who can access your system, read, write, or execute. So there's a lot in this ecosystem. Probably here you'll have to dive a little more into the operating system, understand different Linux commands, what's used when. And yes, we have the AI coding assistant, so things are easy. But when it's production systems and you have to log into the server, you need to know what command your AI agent is running. You cannot just randomly let it execute anything. And by the end of this video, you will also get a repo link, added some resources, some games that you can use to practice these Linux skills. Now, alternatively, there are Windows skills that matter too. Many of the enterprises use Windows servers for their workloads. So PowerShell and Windows administration are real assets, especially in Azure-based environments. Resources to practice PowerShell and Windows-based environments are also added to the GitHub link below. Once these Linux or Windows skills are achieved, then comes scripting. You can start with Bash scripting first, and then if you want, you can also dive into Python, which helps with automation. Now, where does scripting comes into picture? Here's a practical rule. The second time you're doing a task manually, script it. Rotating logs, cleaning up disk, checking service health across 10 servers. That's scripting territory. This is what we call automation later on. Let's take an example of a simple script to give you an idea where it comes in. The first line, bin bash, is the shebang, which tells the operating system to execute the script using the bash shell. Then service equal to nginx creates a variable to store the service name. So you can reuse the variable multiple times throughout the script without hard coding it. Then the if statement using the systemctl command checks if the nginx service is running or not. If the service is running, the system prints the confirmation message. Otherwise, it prints the service is down and restarts using the systemctl command. The script ends with fi, which closes the if-else conditional loop. That's the mindset shift from typing commands to writing commands that runs by themselves. Now, how deep you should go here? You should be able to log in into a server, whether it's a Linux server or a Windows server, understand why an application is down using certain commands, checking logs, and maybe able to write some scripts to check it automatically by itself the next time. Again, you don't have to be a kernel expert here. You just need to understand how to operate these systems. But servers don't live alone. They need to talk to each other. This is where networking comes in. Here are the practical essentials you must know. First, DNS, also known as domain name system. How a name converts into an IP address. Half of the outage stories start here, and as an on-call, you'll be the one fixing these issues. Then dive into IP addresses, CIDRs, subnets. As a DevOps engineer, you need to be able to design a virtual private cloud, picking up CIDR ranges, creating subnets for resources, then have a good knowledge of ports and protocols. TCP versus UDP. Which port your application is actually listening on, why an application is failing health checks, is there a port problem there? Next, firewalls and security groups, what traffic is allowed in and what traffic is allowed out. Also, why? Then load balancers, how traffic is distributed across multiple servers, so there is no single source of failure. Also dive a little bit more around internal and external load balancers, application and network load balancers. These differences would come handy. Try to understand the trade-offs between these load balancers. One thing within networking that I've struggled always is layer 4 and layer 7 networking. So don't be me until you find a problem and then you have to study through it. Start understanding the problem itself. What's the main difference between layer 4 and layer 7? Layer 4 routes through IPs and ports, whereas layer 7 routes by URLs, host names, and headers. There's a whole networking crash course that I've created which will help you go through all of these concepts. You'll find all those links in the GitHub repo below. Now, Linux gives you servers. Networking connects those servers. But where do these servers actually live today? They live in the cloud. AWS, GCP, Azure, OCI, all of these are public cloud providers. There are also private data centers where enterprises host these servers, but in the digital native world, most of these applications are hosted on a cloud provider. Now, the cloud, practically speaking, is someone else's data center that you interact with using APIs. Instead of buying a physical server and then get it after 3 weeks, you instantly provision a cloud server in 30 seconds. So you don't have to do capacity planning for peak traffic times. You can scale up and down and pay only for the resources used. So cloud is basically the place where everything you just learned becomes real. The Linux server, now it's an EC2, Elastic Compute Cloud, or Azure VM or GCP Compute Engine. The networking concepts that you learned earlier translate into VPCs, subnets, security groups, firewalls, load balancers in the cloud domain. The critical takeaway here is every cloud provider gives you the core building blocks: compute, virtual machines, or serverless functions. The storage layer, that's object storage, file storage, or block storage. Networking, your private network, subnets, load balancers. The identity and access management layer, basically who can do what. Manage databases, so you don't have to provision databases by hand. It's all managed by the cloud provider. Then there's security and specific DevOps-based services offered by these cloud providers as well. These categories covers 80% of what DevOps engineers touches daily. Now, how to prepare and to what level? Pick one cloud and commit to it for 3 months. There are free cloud learning paths that these cloud providers offers themselves. So complete one end-to-end learning path. Then claim the free credits from these providers and start building. You don't have to dive into 200 plus services for each cloud provider. pick the categories, dive into the main ones, and then proceed with the project. I have created some crash courses for AWS GCP. Check it out in the GitHub repo. And one key piece of information, which is not a joke, create alerts before building anything. When you're new to this cloud world, there's a surprise billing story. Just this July, an AWS billing bug showed people estimated bills in billions. An account that normally spends 19 cents got a bill of 2.5 billion. That was an actual glitch, so nobody owed anything. But yours won't be a glitch. So set alerts. One more important thing, these cloud providers implement the same concepts. So if you're well versed with AWS and your job description specifies Azure, try to map the concepts. It won't take months for you to ramp up. So learn one cloud provider deeply, and the next one you can always translate based on the requirements. Foundations done. Server, network, cloud. Now the delivery chain begins, and it begins with the code. We start here with Git workflows. Git is where every change starts. DevOps engineers care less about Git commit and more about the workflows. Our team moves changes without stepping on each other. Now, to take a step back, Git is a local version control system that lets you track local code changes. GitHub, on the other hand, is a remote cloud platform that hosts these GitHub projects so that different teams can collaborate. And then there is GitHub Actions that basically set up the CI/CD process, which we'll dive into later. Here's a standard Git flow in practice. You create a branch of main, you make your changes and push it. Then you open a pull request. There are some automated checks that runs. Then a teammate reviews your changes, and once that's done, it gets merged into the main branch. That's it. The merge to the main branch is the trigger for everything downstream. Two patterns you'll hear about. First, feature branching, where each change lives on a short-lived branch. Most teams use this. And second, trunk-based development, where everyone merges to main very frequently in small pieces. This is what high velocity team aims for, because there are smaller changes and if anything goes wrong, they can easily roll back. In DevOps, Git is mainly used for version controlling application code and infrastructure configurations. It helps you collaborate through branches and pull requests, triggers CI/CD pipelines, and in more advanced setups, you implement GitOps workflows. Basically, you use Git as a single source of truth for your deployments. Now, the code has merged. Who will check it, build it, and deploy it? A human? Nope. This is where CI/CD comes in. CI, aka continuous integration, answers one question. Is this change safe to merge? Every change merged to the GitHub repo triggers a pipeline that installs dependencies, run linting checks, run some more tests, and finally builds the app. If anything fails in this pipeline, the change doesn't go in. Now CD is the delivery side. It comes in two flavors. First, continuous delivery. The pipeline builds, tests, and package the release. Once that's done, a human reviews this before it is pushed to the production. On the other hand, with continuous deployment, if all the checks passed, the change goes to the production directly. So no human intervention here. Most companies run continuous delivery in production because it's required to have human in the loop before anything is pushed to the production servers. And you won't go to continuous deployment path unless you have tested the whole automation pipeline and have better rollback workflows. There's one CI/CD crash course that I have published before. You must check it out. It goes into these pipelines in detail. Now, as a person who's just starting your journey in DevOps or switching from software to DevOps, how deep you should go into this. My honest suggestion here is pick one tool, build an end-to-end pipeline and just learn through the process. Test, build and deploy. One working pipeline teaches you more than 5 tutorials. There's a project that I have also created which you can test it out yourself. Now, we know CI/CD is the way to build and ship code. But what exactly are we shipping here? The code, the artifact, or what? Now, with CI/CD pipelines, we ship an artifact. What exactly is that artifact? For modern application, the artifact is a container. This is where Docker comes in. A container is a lightweight package that bundles your application and its dependencies. To run it, you need a container runtime. Now, Docker is more than a container runtime. It's a whole containerization platform. Now, there are other container runtimes like CRIO or Containerd. Their interface differs a bit in scope and architecture. Now, what does Docker do? Instead of shipping code and hoping that your server's environment matches, you package your application with its environment. The runtime, the dependencies, the configurations, everything sealed into one unit called container. So you can build that container once and can run on any machine. There are certain terms that matters the most, such as Docker file. It is a text file with instruction to build your application's environment. When you build it, you get an image. This is the read-only package that comes out of the build phase. And when you create a running instance of that image, that is called a container. So the flow here is, there's a Docker file. You build an image, then you run a container. One image can be used to run many identical containers. The key problem that container solves here is the cold start problem. Unlike the virtual machines, containers don't carry the whole operating system. They share the same host kernel, which helps them start faster than the normal virtual machines. In your build stage, the CI system builds an image that gets pushed to a registry. This could be a Docker Hub registry or your cloud provider managed registry. Now, how deep you should go? A simple answer to that is you should be able to understand the Docker fundamentals, architecture, networking, volume, and then build a full end-to-end project along with the CI/CD pipeline. There's a Docker series coming right after this video, so stay tuned. Now you know what one container is, but in production systems, there are thousands of containers spread across multiple servers. How do you manage them? This is where Kubernetes comes in. It is the orchestrator. You stop managing containers one by one. You tell Kubernetes this is the desired state through a YAML file. Example, I want 3 replicas of this app, this much CPU, and available on this port. Kubernetes makes this a reality. If there are any container crashes, Kubernetes restarts it. Any server node dies, it reschedules those containers elsewhere. If traffic spikes, Kubernetes scales them out. Now, there are multiple objects within a Kubernetes ecosystem, such as pods, which is the smallest deployment unit that can hold multiple containers. Then there is deployments, which manages multiple replicas and rolling updates. Services, that gives you a stable endpoint to connect to your application. All of these are defined in a YAML file that gets stored in a Git repository or any private repository. So in your day-to-day role, you will come across a bunch of things with respect to Kubernetes, such as setting up clusters with separate storage, networking, RBAC, which is like managing the access across the cluster, and there will be a lot of debugging and troubleshooting involved. Also, the Kubernetes certifications are all about that, where you learn how to debug and troubleshoot real-time scenarios. So if you want to learn advanced Kubernetes, check out the Kubernetes certifications for sure. I've also shared a bunch of Kubernetes learning resources as well as discount codes for certifications in the link below. Now, this is the delivery chain where Kubernetes-packed clusters are hosting your application. But one of the key concerns that come up a lot is, are we shipping the code safely? This is where DevSecOps come into picture. The main essence of DevSecOps is to build security in the pipeline instead of plugging it at the end. In the old model, the teams build the code and the systems for months, and then the security teams reviews it right before the release. They find 50 plus issues and the release slips. So in that model, security was a gate at the end. DevSecOps shifts security to the left, meaning we add security earlier in the process, where problems are cheaper to fix. In a real pipeline that looks like concrete stages, there is dependency scanning, where you check your packages for known vulnerabilities using tools like Trivy or Snike. Then there is secret scanning, catching the API keys or secrets before they get pushed to Git or any other external platforms. Then there is static analysis, where you scan your code for insecure patterns. There is also image scanning, where you check your container image for known vulnerabilities before it's even pushed to the registry. So the delivery chain we just built get new steps. Right after the build, you scan the image. If there's any critical vulnerability that shows up, the pipeline fails, exactly like a failed test. So the mental model here is the pipeline itself catches security issues way earlier. Now the pipeline is safe and secure. What about all these resources? Who builds that? Initially, when you provisioned resources, it was all done manually. You go to the console or CLI, run some commands or do some clicking, and you create those resources. But as a DevOps engineer, you are focused on automation. This is where infrastructure as a code brings that automation. Everything you want to deploy for your application on the infrastructure layer, you define it in files and not click through the console. Now there are tools for it to manage the IAC workflows. Terraform is one of them. You write a file, one VPC, 2 subnets, cluster, a database. You run Terraform apply. It calls the APIs underneath and deploys those resources. Now if you change the same file and maybe add another security rule, the tool makes sure that the desired state matches the infrastructure that's deployed. Now, Terraform is just one way of provisioning infrastructure as code, but there are other tools as well. For example, Pulumi lets you provision infrastructure through programming languages. Then there is CloudFormation, that's AWS-based provisioning tool, where you declare the state of the infrastructure and it makes it live. Now, key things you should remember here. These tools helps you make your infrastructure repeatable. You can spin up the same infrastructure for different environments: developer, dev, QA, production. It's also reviewable, which means every change that you make on the infrastructure level gets pushed to the Git. People review it before it's made live. Another major advantage is during disaster recovery situations. When one region fails, you can instantly provision infrastructure in another region through the same template. The other themes that you should focus on for this bucket is state management, multi-cloud provisioning, and automation for custom resources. Next, we are diving into GitOps. Why does it exist? In traditional CI/CD systems, the pipeline deploys to the servers directly, which means your CI systems holds credentials to your production clusters, which is very dangerous. If there's any misconfiguration or compromise that happens on the CI layer, it will impact the production servers as well. GitOps flips this direction. Instead of pipeline pushing the changes directly into the cluster, it just updates the Git repository with the desired state. This could be the image version, how many replicas you want to run. In your cluster, there's an operator that runs a reconciliation loop that matches the desired state to actual state. These operators are Argo CD or Flux CD, and its job is to match whatever is in Git to your actual cluster state. So practically, Git is a single source of truth here, not just for your application code, but also for your infrastructure configurations. Every deployment is a commit, so your audit trail is basically your Git history. And if you want to roll back, just to Git revert. So two key takeaways here. CI/CD builds and validates, whereas GitOps deploys. So how to prepare for this layer? Use the learning resources from the repo link below and then build an end-to-end pipeline using both the workflows. Deploying your application is halfway, but knowing what's happening in your production clusters is the other half. This is where observability comes in. It has three pillars. First, the metrics. What are the numbers over time? CPU, memory, request rate, the traffic pattern. There are tools to do that, such as Prometheus, that scrape metrics from your workloads. Then there is Grafana, which helps you visualize those metrics through dashboards. The second pillar is logs, the record of what happened when your process failed or your service didn't restart. The logs tell you a story line by line. There are logging agents that you can deploy within your cluster that can collect these records and then export it to your log management portal. There are different agents like Datadog agents that can collect these logs and then give you a platform to review it and then track it, what happened when. Then the third pillar is traces. Basically, it gives you the journey of a request, how it hops through different services before producing a response. Within microservices architecture, this is very important because there are so many components within a system, it gets very difficult to debug. Now, how deep to go for this layer? Pick tools like Prometheus or Grafana to collect metrics, visualize metrics through the dashboards, and just understand the end-to-end workflow here. Our last layer is AI infrastructure and AI ops. AI is reshaping DevOps roles in a few different ways. First is AI infrastructure. Many DevOps engineers are staying close to the infrastructure layer, but instead of focusing on traditional workloads, they are focusing on AI workloads. Training and inference needs GPUs, which are expensive and scarce. For example, Kubernetes now orchestrates GPU workloads. Model weights becomes large artifacts that need storage and versioning, and networking becomes more important with GPU to GPU communication. So the fundamentals in this layer are still the same: containers, Kubernetes, networking, storage, but you are applying them to AI systems. The second direction is MLOps. In this role, you are extending the traditional CI/CD pipeline to continuous training and model deployment. In addition to managing infrastructure, you are managing datasets, model versions, experiments, feature pipelines, automated retraining. So basically your job here is to deploy and manage machine learning models. Third is AI ops, basically using AI to improve IT operations. In this case, you're using AI to analyze logs, collect metrics, detect anomalies, correlate alerts, identify root causes during incidents. Basically, you are leveraging AI to troubleshoot issues faster. And finally, there's the model hosting and serving layer, where my role fits in. This focuses on deploying and optimizing inference workloads, serving these different models efficiently, managing backend engines like VLLM, TRTLLM, SGLang, focusing on the user metrics like improving latency and throughput, as well as system metrics such as GPU utilization, cost. The main essence of this layer is to make AI applications more reliable in production. The practical takeaway here is AI isn't replacing DevOps engineers. It's just compressing the boring parts, log digging, analyzing reports. So engineers' time is spent on decisions and not searching. But it only helps if you understand the fundamentals underneath it, because you need to verify what these AI agents tell you. Now that's a wrap. Let's run the entire workflow back, start to finish. DevOps culture puts one team on the entire journey. You build it, you run it. Linux and scripting are the ground everything stands on. Networking is where the real debugging happens. The cloud is where it actually runs. Git workflows moves changes into small reviewed pieces. CI/CD validates and ships these changes automatically. Docker packages an app with its environment. Kubernetes runs those apps at scale and keeps them alive. DevSecOps bakes security into the whole chain. Infrastructure as code makes the platform itself repeatable. GitOps makes Git as the single source of truth for deployments. Observability tells you what production system is actually doing. And AI infrastructure, AI ops, ML ops, model hosting and survey is basically the layer where AI and DevOps meet. All the learning resources, labs, projects are in the link below. If this video helped, make sure you subscribe to the channel. See you in the next one.